Hi everyone, welcome to Making Academic Vocabulary Stick, where you are going to fill your instructional toolbox with some engaging strategies for teaching academic vocabulary in secondary math classrooms. My name is Ashley Roberts. I am the secondary math coach here in Keller ISD. Welcome. For this presentation, you are going to need to have paper and pen ready and nearby. So if you need to stop the video real quick and go grab those things, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, we'll get started. All right, let's take a little preview of our learning today, and we're going to preview our session by doing a strategy called pile of words. So you should see a pile of words in the white box on your screen. And in just a second, I want you to pause the video and just think about it. Think about these words. Which of the words do you already know? Maybe you have experience with some of them. Which words do you maybe need to define using some of your online resources? And then go ahead and capture your definitions and your thoughts in your notes. Go ahead and pause the video just to do that with these words. All right, now what you're going to do is group the words into categories. So think about which words share some common characteristics. And then think about what would you label the category of words to reflect that commonality. So in just a second, I'm going to have you pause the video again and actually sort these words into categories. And then go ahead and give each category a name or a label. I'll give you a second to pause the video and do that now. All right, and our last step in previewing our learning today is to make a prediction. Now that you have your words in categories, try to review the words, the categories, and the labels that you made, and make a prediction about what you are expecting to learn today based on this pile of words. What would be some big ideas that you would expect to explore during this session and maybe even walk away with? All right, let's do some brainstorming. On your paper, I want you to brainstorm a list of reasons why teaching vocabulary would be important in mathematics. Try to list as many as possible on your paper. You will have 1 minute just to keep writing and writing as much as you can. Why is academic vocabulary important in math? Ready? I'll set the timer now. Go. All right, that was 1 minute. I hope you brainstormed a list of why teaching vocabulary is important in math. All right, here's some ideas we thought of that maybe you could add to your list as well. It's important to teach vocabulary in math so that students understand what the question is asking. If they lack the vocabulary and they get hung up on specific words that they don't understand, they get stuck on the reading portion and they don't even understand the math that the question is asking them to do. Second of all, often everyday words have different meanings when we're in mathematical context. So, examples of this might include the word negative. Negative can mean something totally different outside of class than it does in class. Same for other words like table. So, different meanings in math and outside of math. That can be confusing for students. A third reason why it's important to teach vocabulary in math is because that more and more classrooms are having a large or even a majority amount of ESL learners. So we have to differentiate and include these learners in our classrooms and even the playing field so that they all have access to the math and have the same chance to be successful. A fourth reason why teaching math vocabulary is to allow for meaningful math discussions. If you've attended any of my other sessions, I have a whole nother KU session on discourse, but we know from research that allowing students to construct meaningful mathematical conversations is so vital to their learning and their success. And to have those conversations, they have to be able to use precise, exact mathematic vocabulary. Add these to your list if you need to, and I'm sure you guys came up with some other great ideas too. All right, we want to talk a little bit about what research says about students learning vocabulary in the math classroom. But before we just give you the research, I want to test it out. So play along with me, this will be fun. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to look at the next slide. Your goal is to try to remember as many of the words that you see on the screen as possible. But the rule is you cannot write anything down. So put your pen and paper to the side. You're about to get 10 seconds to look at the next slide. Are you ready? All right, here we go. Try to remember as many as possible. All right, that was 10 seconds. Now grab your pen. Write down as many words as you can remember in 10 seconds. Ready, go. All right, that was 10 seconds. How did you do? What words did you remember? All right. According to research, most people probably remembered and wrote down the 3 words that included an image first. So our 3 words that included an image first were police officer, teacher, and singer. What about you? Look at your list. Were these 3 on the top of your list? Were they one of the first 3 that stood out to you or that you remembered? If not, take a look at your first 3 words. Why do you think those 3 words stuck out to you first? Why do you think you remembered to write those down? Was it because you have a personal connection to those careers? Like maybe your husband is an accountant and that stuck out to you first. Or maybe it has to do with position on the slide. So maybe you tend to memorize things visually from top down, and maybe your first 3 words were just at the top of the page. Just take a second to consider why you think those first 3 words were the first 3 you remembered. The research tells us that students will remember new vocabulary words better when they incorporate visuals. So these visuals could include pictures, drawings, symbols, graphic organizers, or graph. The most important thing to remember, though, is that these visuals are student created. It does help to have teacher-generated visuals for sure, but it's definitely even more impactful when the students create these visuals. If you're curious, here was the slide. See what you remembered, see what you forgot. I can't wait to see who remembered the most. You'll have to email me and let me know. All right, moving on. What else does research say about vocabulary instruction? Here are 3 statements that the research says. Number 1, it says that articulation of the word makes nerve impulses in the brain move faster and more effectively, increasing retention of the word and its meaning. The importance of having students speak new words in context cannot be overstated. Wow, think about the importance of discourse in math and articulating those words. Another important part of research says that for students, recoding, meaning putting information into their own words, improves student memory and comprehension. Memorizing set definitions does not create long-term learning. Wow, who knew that having the kids manipulate definitions into their own words was so impactful? And finally, a third piece of research we found says that in order to commit to long-term memory, students must learn the concept first and then attach the academic vocabulary once understanding is solidified. I never thought about flipping the instruction that way and putting the conceptual understanding first before naming it. Take a second and pause the video. With your pen and paper, I would like you to choose which piece of research stood out to you the most. Take a second and reread the 3, then pick one that's really resonating with you in your practice. Write down why that research stood out to you, and then, since we're talking about attaching visuals, draw a visual or some sort of non-linguistic representation to represent that piece of research. Again, you're going to pause the video, pick one of these 3 sticky notes, one left, center, or right that stands out to you. Write down why it stands out to you and then draw a visual representing that research so that you will remember it. Pause the video now. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your chance to dive a little bit deeper into what the research says about academic vocabulary. For the next thing, I'm going to ask you to create this 2-column table on your paper. You can title it Vocabulary Instruction. There will be a place for a title at the top of each of the 2 columns, but for now we're going to leave those titles blank. We will revisit this later. Pause the video now while you create your 2-column table. All right, we've added some ideas in yellow boxes to the screen. I would like you to take a look at these yellow cards, yellow boxes, and read each one. Then sort them into 2 groups. So again, you're thinking about common characteristics. You get to choose the groups. Just take a second, pause the video, and sort each card or each statement into 2 groups. Pause the video now to do that. Now add titles to each of the columns that describes each group. So this is up to you and your individual learning. Add a title to each of your 2 groups. If you need to pause the video to think about a title, go ahead and pause now. All right, here is one possible way that you could have sorted these 2 ideas into groups. This is not necessarily the right answer or the only way, but it is a possible example. We have chosen to sort ours into productive beliefs about vocabulary instruction and unproductive beliefs about vocabulary instruction. On the productive side, we put things like Introduction of new words in mathematical context. So we're teaching the words as we go and as they come up in our instruction. Also on the productive side, of course, is the use of visuals. We already looked at what the research said about that. Also, the teacher is the one modeling precise language during instruction. So we're not sticking to cute sayings or slang terms all the time, but we are modeling the use of precise and accurate mathematical descriptions. And finally, a productive belief is that students are attaching meaning by describing words in their own language. So this is the thing we would want to see and hear as we walked into a classroom. Some unproductive beliefs about vocabulary instruction and what go against our philosophy are these things. Just the rote memorization of definitions of words. So we want to avoid just giving our students a list of vocab words and having them copy definitions or just asking them to rote memorize them. We know that the research says this is not beneficial to our students. We also, again, don't want students memorizing teacher-given definitions. No use of visuals, words only. We know that just a long list of words with no pictures or no meaning to attach is not beneficial. Crossword puzzles where we're just kind of gamifying a word and teacher-given definition is not proven to help students have that precise academic discourse. And then finally, a teacher presenting an algorithm without any academic vocabulary attached would be unproductive. So productive versus unproductive thoughts about vocabulary instruction. Take a second to pause the video now and compare our chart to your chart. How are they the same? How are they different? And do you agree with how we sorted these topics? Maybe there's some that is stretching your thinking or changing your thinking a little bit. Pause the video to compare our chart to yours now. All right, for the remainder of the session, we want to give you 5 engaging vocabulary strategies that help make academic vocabulary stick with your secondary math students. We know that you already have so many tools in the toolbox. We just want to add 5 more that are aligned with our productive beliefs about academic vocabulary instruction in the math classroom. So let's get started. To help you keep track of these 5, on your paper, if you would draw a table that looks like this. So it has 1, 2, 3 columns and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows underneath the title row. We're going to have include the name of the strategy, a description and or a visual representation of the strategy, and then finally, ideas on how or when to use this strategy in class. This is just going to help you keep track and take notes of the next 5 strategies in kind of a visual graphic organizer type way. Pause the video now while you create your graphic organizer on your paper. All right, let's dive in with strategy number 1 for academic vocabulary instruction in your secondary math class. The first one is a triple card sort. So you may have given some cards to students to sort into groups before, or maybe even match. Try incorporating a triple card sort. So here are some examples of how you could have students in pairs or small groups match 3 cards together. So a word matches with a description and matches with a picture or a visual. Remember that our students need to connect that visual in context. So for example, We could, in the green, a y-intercept is the y-coordinate of a point where a line crosses the y-axis, and then we have an image. Or possibly range of a function, the set of all output values of function, and then a visual. So we're having kids match 3 cards together. Now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, that's a teacher-given description or definition, not a student one. Well, after students complete the triple card sort, they would definitely need to write down their own definition or their own description and create their own visual representation in their notes. So giving them time to process, maybe they do the card sort collaboratively as a team, but then individually they have some time to process and decode the description and the picture. Or maybe even these descriptions are student-generated descriptions. We do that ahead of time before we pass and have other students match cards. There are lots of different variations. Go ahead and pause the video now to record your thoughts on your graphic organizer. So you'll want title, a description of the strategy in your own words or a visual to represent it, and then take a second to brainstorm how or when or with which content you could use the strategy in class this year. Pause the video now. Okay. The second strategy to add to your academic vocabulary instruction toolbox is called concept attainment. I'm not sure if you've heard of this one or not. Maybe it's new for you, maybe you've used it in class. Here's how it works. Number one, as the teacher, you're going to show yes examples and no examples. As you do this, the students are silently watching. They are going to develop a common definition for all of the yes examples. Finally, in small groups, students are going to test and refine their list as you give them even more examples of yeses and nos. And finally, students will apply their learning in a new task. It's not until the very end of the concept attainment that you actually attach the academic vocabulary to the concept. Here's what I mean. Experience this as a student with me. This is an example of a yes. However, this is an example of a no. Notice I haven't even given you any hints or clues about what we're talking about today. I'm just giving you examples and non-examples. This is a yes, so maybe my students are noticing, oh, it doesn't just have to be a map, it could be a graph. But this is a no. So now they're starting to think about what makes a yes and what makes a no a no. Here's another example of a yes on a graph. Ooh, but this one is a no. So maybe I've tricked them into thinking a table of values is a no. Oh, but no, this is an example of a yes. So at this point, I would pause to see if my students in groups could come up with a description of the yeses. What makes the yeses yeses? Finally, at the end, I would give them the academic vocabulary to go with this. Did you figure it out? Did you figure out that a yes is a function and a no is not a function? And we would talk about what makes a yes and all of its characteristics. Go ahead and pause the video now to record your thoughts about the concept attainment strategy on your graphic organizer. Make sure to include the title, a description or a visual, and then brainstorm how and with which concepts you could use this strategy in class this year. Pause the video now. All right, strategy number 3 is picture labels. I think this is a really engaging, interactive strategy that I would love to use in my classroom. What you're going to do first is, as the teacher, you're going to post large images, visuals, maybe even graphs or table of values around the room on large poster paper. Then each student is going to be given a sticky note, or possibly more than one, with a vocabulary word written on that sticky note. It will be up to the student to walk around the room and correctly add labels to the images that they see. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, it looks like a student has correctly labeled the hypotenuse of a right triangle. The right angle has been labeled by a student. And the geometry picture of the square pyramid, a student has labeled a slant height, and also base of a square pyramid has been added by a student. Students are given the opportunity to add descriptions and images of all the words in their notes. So after they've added their sticky note vocabulary to images, it would be important for them to gallery walk around to all images, maybe to have some time to process and debrief with a partner. Maybe they even find things that they could ask for clarification on. Maybe there's a label they disagree with, and that would create some really neat discourse. And then they could even add these as notes as they process and reflect individually. Go ahead and pause the video now to record your thoughts about picture labels on your graphic organizer. This is strategy number 3 for teaching academic vocabulary. Make sure to include the title, a description, or a visual, and think about how you could use this in class this year. Pause the video now to do that. All right, before we move on to strategy number 4, I just want you to take note of how we are giving you guys time to process and reflect on these strategies and really put them into your own words and add your own visuals so that hopefully these strategies will be committed to your long-term memory. So we're kind of modeling another strategy that you could use in class. All right, strategy number 4 is the concept definition map. You may or may not have seen these. This actually comes from Avid. This is a great Avid strategy. If you look on the left-hand side, this is a blank concept definition map. It's basically a graphic organizer to help students or partners of students or small groups of students kind of brainstorm and describe what a word means. So the word goes in the middle. We have what is it? What category does it fit into? What is it like? And then what are some examples? On the right-hand side, you can see an example of one that has been filled out by a student or by a group of students. So their word that they were given was proportional relationship. And you can see its characteristics and its traits over on the right-hand side. And then you can see some examples, some student-generated examples below. So there's lots of different variations to this. We could give each group a different word or each student a different word in a small group. We could have students rotate around. There's lots of different variations for filling out the concept definition map. Another really fun variation or a fun twist on this is asking groups of students to complete the entire map for a word, except they don't actually fill in the word in the middle. They leave that part blank. Then we would have those students kind of post their graph up around the room, around the walls. And then we would have other teams of students walk around and try to guess the word that goes in the middle just by being given the characteristics and the examples and the category. So another kind of fun twist on the average strategy concept definition map. Oh, yeah, that's what it would look like with the word blanked out. So we would kind of leave that word blank and have other kids try to guess. Go ahead and pause the video now to record your thoughts about strategy number 4 on your graphic organizer. Pause the video now to do that. All right. Our fifth strategy to incorporate some academic vocabulary into your math classroom is using games. So remember, we are not just giving our kids a list of vocabulary. We are not starting a new unit by copying definitions. We're really engaging them and using the words in context. One game you can play with your students is Taboo. I don't know if you've ever played this game with friends, but you can also make a fun twist by having your students play Taboo in class. How it works is the vocabulary word goes at the top of the card. So in this example, that pink slope, that's the word that the student is trying to get their team or other students to guess. However, they cannot use the most obvious words associated with slope in their description. So they're trying to get their team to guess the word slope, but they're not allowed to use the words rise, run, dividend, gradient, or steep, or divided, or steep. So it makes it a little bit challenging and a little bit more fun. You could even have kids generate these cards themselves and switch with other groups or other partners. Another fun one is Pictionary. So having kids take a vocabulary word, have to draw it, and get other students to guess that vocabulary word. Can you guess what this student drawing is from? And actually, they did this Pictionary digitally using Jamboard on this one, I believe. And finally, another fun game to play is Two Truths and a Lie. Or Two Truths and a Fib. Maybe you've played this game as a get to know you activity with friends or with your students before, but you can also use it using academic vocabulary. For example, this is one a student wrote. They said, number 1, you can find the circumference of a circle by multiplying the diameter by pi. Number 2, the diameter is twice as long as the radius. And number 3, the diameter divided by 1/2 is the radius. So 2 of those are truths. 1 of them is a lie. Can you figure out which one it is? But look how much rich and precise academic vocabulary the student used to write these statements, to speak these statements, and for the other students to guess which one is a lie, they have to know the vocabulary. There are tons of other games. I'm sure you have other fun ones too. Other ones we thought of were the lead forward strategy, vocabulary. You'll have to look that one up if you're interested. You actually tape a vocabulary word to the back of a student's shirt, and students walk around asking each other yes or no questions, trying to figure out what the word on their back is. And maybe the first one that figures it out wins a prize or something. Another fun game is like 25-cent pyramid, where one student can see the screen at the front of the room, the partner cannot see the screen, and so the student that is facing the screen is quickly trying to describe the vocabulary words on the screen and get their partner to guess as many as possible before the time runs out. So like I said, tons more games, and I'm sure you have some great ones too. Go ahead and pause the video now to record your thoughts on this 5th and final engaging vocabulary instruction strategy. All right, here is a frequently asked question that we kind of wanted to wrap up our session today with. We hear this a lot. Okay, I get it. I'm spending a lot of instructional time talking about vocabulary. My students are talking about vocabulary in their discourse, but how do I assess this? What does this look like on a test? Well, here are some examples that we gathered from teachers. One is a true or false question on their summative assessment. So maybe this is at the end. True or false, it is possible for a quadratic equation to have 2 zeros. Explain your reasoning. So students not only have to say true or false, but they also have to say why they believe that. And think about the academic vocabulary they have to understand to read the question, but then to be able to respond. So true or false is a great way to assess. Another strategy is the connect to strategy. So here on an assessment, you would give students 2 columns of words and ask them to choose one word from each column and make some sort of connection. They would need to write what their connection is. So maybe there's something in common, maybe they share characteristics. We're getting kids to use vocabulary, to communicate mathematically, they're writing and they're engaging in that written academic discourse using the vocabulary. What we do not want to see on a summative assessment is just basic matching. We're not matching words to definitions. We are not just copying definitions. We are not filling in the blank. So those would be unproductive ways to assess vocabulary. So take a second and pause the video if you need to and just compare and contrast. What's the difference in the true or false and connect to strategy as compared to just a basic matching words and definitions? Hopefully you're noticing that students are being asked to use the vocabulary in context, not just memorize a definition. In summary, today we are going to ask you to grab your pen and paper again, and at the bottom of your graphic organizer where you have been keeping your notes, if you would do a 3, 2, 1 summary. This is another lead forward strategy. So 3, would you write down 3 things you learned today about academic vocabulary instruction in your math classroom? 2, write down 2 questions you still have or 2 things you're still wondering about. And then 1, go back and revisit your prediction from the beginning of the session. Was your prediction accurate? Did we learn about what you thought we were going to learn about today? Are there any additional words or terms that you want to add to your pile of words? Go ahead and pause the video to complete your 3, 2, 1 summary today, just so you have some time to process and think about all that we talked about today. Pause the video now. Thank you so much for completing your 3, 2, 1 summary. I appreciate your time so much today. I hope you got a little bit of insight into the research behind what academic vocabulary instruction looks like, why we teach vocabulary in math, and how to make it stick with your kids. Again, my name is Ashley Roberts. I'm the secondary math coach. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is ashley.roberts@kellerisd.net. I would love to hear your 2 questions or your 2 wonderings that you are still thinking about. So feel free to reach out about those 2 questions. Also, if you just want to sit down and brainstorm some ways that you can teach academic vocabulary this year in class, I would love to sit down and be a thinking partner with you on that and just brainstorm some more ideas. Reese Brooks is our secondary math coordinator, and she helped with this presentation, and she is more than willing to brainstorm and sit down with you as well. Thank you again so much. Have a great day.